Hi team, welcome back to lesson 3.3, economic efficiency with Miss Purcell. For this lesson, we want to be able to explain the meaning and significance of economic efficiency, and that includes allocative, productive, dynamic, and intertemporal efficiency. And then what we're going to do with them is explain their relationship to the PPF model, okay? Not much to say here, except that please note if you do see the word technical efficiency, it simply means productive efficiency. Okay, so they're substitutes for each other. They mean exactly the same thing depending on what resource you're using. So I want to start with productive efficiency. This occurs where the maximum possible amount of output is achieved for a given level of inputs. Okay, when we say inputs, we mean resources. So our land, labor, capital, and enterprise is being used to the best of its ability. That means that we are minimizing waste. We are minimizing the application of idle resources. So resources are fully employed, i.e., we should have low levels of unemployment. We shouldn't have capital resources sitting around doing nothing. Okay, we are using everything to the best of its ability. So this means that the combination of land, labor, capital, and enterprise is configured in a way such that no more possible output is achievable. So if we think about that in terms of our PPF, and we've seen this diagram before, hopefully this is kind of ringing some alarm bells in the sense that anything along the curve is basically going to be considered as productively efficient, right? Because we know that when we look at the PPF, if we are using our resources to the best of their ability, we're going to be somewhere along that curve, okay? I will comment on price for a moment. So, an increase in productive efficiency leads to a decrease in the average price of each unit of output. So, if you think of a producer, if they're able to use their resources as productively, efficiently as possible, it means that the average cost per each unit produced is going to be as low as possible, right? So that's going to make them more competitive relative to other producers. And remember that we're looking to obviously maximize profits. And so if we're able to reduce the average price per unit produced, we're likely to attract that demand and we're able to maximize our profits. So in terms of the PPC, productive efficiency occurs anywhere across points B, C, D, and A, and you need to be able to explain why that's the case. All right. The next one is allocative efficiency. It takes a slightly different lens, and this is all to do with making sure that goods and services are produced such that the wants and needs of society are best satisfied. So if we dial it back to the basic economic problem, we're obviously dealing with a situation where us as humans have unlimited wants and needs, and we know that our environment only affords limited resources, so we've got the problem, right? So if we think about the three economic questions for a moment, what to produce, we need to make sure that we're producing such that we're able to best satisfy the wants and needs of society. So that means making things that people demand in order to best satisfy those wants and needs. All right. And this one is about making sure that markets are able to operate as freely as possible, such that those wants and needs are best satisfied. If I sort of think of a bit of an extreme case, it could be a situation where the government comes in and dictates what is produced, as opposed to natural market forces allowing for people to demand goods and services, and then for suppliers to respond accordingly because they're obviously looking to maximize profits. Okay. So I've changed this one up a little bit. It's the same graph, but it's got different axes. Just have a quick look. On the x-axis, we've got illicit drugs, and on the y-axis, we've got healthy food. Let's just keep it really simple and assume that illicit drugs are demerit goods, they're bad, and no one wants them. I know that's not always the case. And then on the y-axis with healthy food, we assume that everybody wants it, and that's where our resources should be allocated, okay? So in terms of the PPC, allocative efficiency occurs when resources are used to produce goods and services that maximize outcomes for society. In this case, we would hope that all our resources would then be funneled into the production of healthy food, because the minute we start allocating resources towards the production of illicit drugs, we are now no longer maximizing the satisfaction of the wants and needs of society. So I've said here at point B, the production of illicit drugs is equal to 0, whereas at any other point, resources will be allocated towards the production of this demerit good, this illicit drug. So in this graph, in this sense, allocative efficiency is maximized at point B and nowhere else, okay? If we wind back to the original graph with the original axes label, it's actually kind of tricky to understand where allocative efficiency might fall, because we can't objectively comment on the merit of food and clothing. Like, you can argue they're both necessities, and they're both merit goods, and they're both good for people to have. So this one's not as black and white, but if you start playing with extreme kind of goods and services, you might pick something like military goods or weapons of mass destruction. And again, that's not easy either. Lots of countries need military goods, and lots of people would argue that they are merit goods. But if you take something that you try to think of as objectively bad, such as illicit drugs, then we can convey this argument a little bit more clearly. All right, the next type of efficiency is dynamic efficiency, which refers to how quickly resources can be reallocated from the production of one good or service to the next. So, depending on the demand for goods and services, producers obviously want to respond to that because they ultimately want to maximize their profit. So, you wake up one day and the demand's for good A, and you wake up the next day and the demand is moved to good B. You want to be in a position where, as a producer, you can move your land, labor, capital, and enterprise away from A towards B as quickly as possible because you want to be able to maximize your profits. Now, in the real world, that's not as black and white. With highly specialized equipment that serves a single purpose, it's not always as simple to say, "Oh, we're going to use this for something else now." It's not always the case. I've included an image here of hand sanitizer, however, because I want to comment that during the pandemic, many distilleries that would ordinarily have produced spirits, they actually changed tact and started to produce hand sanitizer. So hand sanitizer was actually, it was pretty popular product throughout the pandemic. It still remains quite a popular product relative to pre-pandemic levels. But during the pandemic, we experienced shortages of hand sanitizer, right? And so that drove up the price. And producers responded, distillery producers responded because they were in a unique position where they could use their existing distillery equipment that they would usually use to produce alcohol. They did it to produce hand sanitizer. So it's just a really great real world example where dynamic efficiency in that industry for that particular product was actually quite high. Whereas in reality, it is difficult and it does take time to convert or move your land, labor, capital, and enterprise from the production of one good to another. So how does that translate on our production possibility frontier? Again, this is the same graph we've been looking at the whole time, except I've just included an arrow from point D to point C. So in terms of the PPC, if this economy being this PPF with food and clothes, was dynamically efficient, the movement from one point to another would be really quick. All right. So let's say you woke up one day and people were demanding mostly clothing, and then the next day you woke up and the demand had shifted towards food. You as the producer would think, okay, there's more money to be made in food. I'm going to take my resources away from clothing and I'm going to convert them towards food because I want to produce food because now I'm going to get a higher price, okay? So assume there was an increase in the demand for food. Producers would reallocate their resources towards the production of food, for example, causing a movement from point D to point C. And if we were dynamically efficient, that would be relatively quick, okay? The last one I want to speak to is intertemporal efficiency. I'll start off by saying that this one does not have an application to the PPF, okay? So you do not need to be able to go to your PPF diagram and illustrate intertemporal efficiency. So intertemporal efficiency refers to how well resources are balanced between one time period and the next. And to maximize it, producers have to be aware of how their overconsumption of resources towards production today will impact production into the future. So this is really dealing with issues related to sustainability. It's not perfect by any means. A lot of us are short-sighted, and producers in particular want to maximize profits today. So there is an incentive for them to overconsume or overuse particular goods and services, particular resources in the short run, and it will compromise our capacity to access them into the long run. So intertemporal efficiency, although we don't necessarily call it that or you don't see it in the media, it is quite a hot topic that is discussed at length. And it's got a lot to do with the overconsumption of our natural resources in today's world, okay? So intertemporal efficiency, make sure you know your definition and that you're able to speak to it in terms of the overconsumption of natural resources today and the negative impact that may have on generations into the future. Okay, so that's the 4 different types of efficiency in economics, and it was a bit of a whirlwind, so go back and have a look if you need to. But I think I want to bring it back to this idea of, well, why efficiency? Like, why is that something that we focus on as economists, okay? And I've said this a million times throughout this video, right? I've spoken to the basic economic problem at length, because that's what efficiency is seeking to satisfy. So we go back to relative scarcity, and we know that's to do with a situation where our unlimited wants and needs cannot be fully satisfied compared to the world's limited resources. And where we can maximize efficiency, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be any particular type, it can kind of be thought about as all of them. Where we are able to maximize efficiency, the problem of relative scarcity should be minimized. And that really should encapsulate all four types of efficiency, which don't always agree with each other, right? Like if you take productive efficiency, we're all about maximizing the use of resources today to the best of their ability to maximize output. And then we want to talk about allocative efficiency on top of that. We want to do that such that we can best satisfy the wants and needs of the future. However, if you throw into temporal efficiency in there, we want to start a conversation about making sure we do that in a manner that's balanced, so that future generations have access to the resources that they will need to maximize their outcomes. So it's not a harmonious story. These are in conflict with each other. Okay, so let's look at some multis. Once again, make sure you read them all before you dive in and decide what the answer is. So, in terms of achieving an efficient allocation of resources, the need for balancing current and future consumption relates to. This one looks good, okay? Current, future, I'm thinking, well, it's got to be intertemporal. I'm going to look through the list, and there I can see it. D is intertemporal efficiency. So the answer to this question is D, and I've got that because I know my definition. So guys, here's your proof that you must know your definitions from day one, because that exam at the end of the year, there's a lot of time between now and then. So make sure all those little definitions, you've got them right in your head, okay? And then the second one's a very similar question. So what name is given to the type of efficiency where resources are allocated to increase choice and meet the changing tastes and needs of consumers? It's not the strict definition of allocative efficiency, but it is dealing with the needs of consumers. So I'm looking at that sort of pseudo definition, and I'm thinking that's got to be to do with satisfying the wants and needs of society. Therefore, the answer must be B. All right, guys, I hope that was good. I'll see you in the next video.